Welcome, welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight to our interfaith event here tonight. We're thankful for all the participants. We're thankful for those who are joining us. My name is John Tolson. I'm with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I've been asked to be the moderator as a result of a group of individuals from different faiths who meet on a monthly basis called the Simi Valley Interfaith Council. We meet once a month and then do activities and programs. And recently we've been meeting via Zoom. And so we've had some events in the past in person. And so tonight we're happy to have everyone join us for this. What we're going to do now is I'm going to introduce each of our panelists and have them come on and just to see who they are, and then we'll go back and we'll start the questions. So we have Kent Alkire. Kent, join us. Kent Alkire is from from the Bahai faith for nearly 50 years, has lived and raised his family here in Simi Valley since 1983. Kent has served on 5 different Baha'i local spiritual assemblies and was elected to the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'i of Sierra Leone while working for the Peace Corps. Kent is an active member of the Interfaith Board and is a board member for Simi Valley Community Council. Thanks, Kent, for joining us.
Hi, it's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Wendy Sempil is a modern traditional witch. She is a high priestess of a local coven, very active in the Simi Valley Interfaith Council and the greater Pagan community. She is also moderates the Witches of Simi Valley Facebook group, a 30-year Simi Valley resident with her husband, dogs, cats, and a turtle. Wendy collects vintage Halloween memorabilia, Funko Pops, and black cats. Wendy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Ryan Kapanik is representing the Islamic community. Ryan grew up in a military family, but has called California home for the last 21 years. He received his undergraduate degree at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He now works as a manufacturing intelligence consultant, and he is a practicing Muslim for the past 11 years. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The Reverend Stacy Thomas is the pastor of the United Church of Christ in Simi Valley. She's an active member of the Simi Valley Interfaith Council, is passionate about interfaith and interracial work. Prior to becoming UCC Simi's pastor, Stacy worked in hospice for 8 years as a chaplain, spiritual care counselor, bereavement counselor, and volunteer coordinator. She currently is enjoying the COVID-19 lifestyle of reading, scrapbooking, spending time with family, including 2 dogs, 2 cats, and hosting game nights on Fridays via Zoom with some of the more adventurous congregants. Reverend Stacy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Rabbi Michelle Pasco has been the spiritual leader of the congregation B'nai Emet for over 25 years. She also teaches Jewish studies courses at Cal State Northridge. This semester, she is teaching applied Jewish ethics. Her passion is travel, which is not happening now, and learning about history and culture. She has 2 grown sons. Rabbi, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Shalom and welcome. And I'm honored to be with everyone tonight.
The Reverend Andy Maddock came to serve as senior pastor of the United Methodist Church of Simi Valley in July of 2010. His passions in ministry are reaching all people through excellence in the arts of worship, preaching, and teaching. Personally, Andy enjoys riding his bike, technology and computers, guitar, and pop culture. And you might even see him occasionally on a stage of a theater. Welcome, Andy Maddock. Reverend, thank you.
Lovely to be here tonight. Thanks so much.
Reverend Stephen Rambo. Stephen is the pastor of Center for Spiritual Living, Simi Valley. Going by the more casual Steve Rambo, he was the weathercaster and environmental reporter for KCBS TV2 for over a decade. In the years since television, Reverend Stephen earned a bachelor's degree in liberal studies and theology from Antioch University and awarded a master's degree from the Holmes Institute for Consciousness Studies. Reverend Stephen loves camping, nature, biking, motorcycling, reading, gardening, and cooking. Reverend Stephen, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, John. Thanks for having us. Thanks to all the panelists and all those that are participating. Look forward to having a wonderful conversation with you all.
Beautiful. Thank you. President Kent Lee, he's one of 10 children. He's the 8th one, and his mother had, catch this, 4 sets of twins and 2 singles. He grew up in Burbank, went to Burbank High School, graduated with a bachelor's degree in political science from Cal State Northridge. Interrupted his college studies to serve a 2-year mission in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So he speaks Spanish. And he says it wasn't until his junior year in high school that he became active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and has been ever since. After college, he married Kathy Cannon and immediately was drafted into the Army. Better said, I won the lottery. His early vocational career was mostly involved with sales and sales management. Then he started a business of a small automotive drive shaft business, which he sold and retired 3 years ago. He's been in many different positions in the church, and he's been a Sunday school teacher, bishop's counselor, bishop, and stake president. Currently, he's a Elders Quorum president in the Simi Fifth Ward, which is here in Simi Valley. Kent Lee, President Kent Lee, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be invited, and thank you. It's a austere opportunity to talk with all these great ministers in our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. And last but not least is Reverend Nika Eaton Gwynn. Reverend Nika Eaton Gwynn has been the minister for the Chalice Unitarian Universal Fellowship in Newbury Park for the last 4 years. Prior to that, she served as consulting minister in Studio City. Reverend Nika brings a background in classical music management, psychotherapy, and life coaching, as well as the performing arts to her work in ministry. Raised in Germany and the UK, Reverend Nika has settled in California for the last 20 years with her husband and 16-year-old son. Reverend Nika, thank you for joining us.
It's such a delight to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Fantastic. So we have a great group of people here. What we're going to do is that we're going to ask each a question, and we're going to go in the same order that we did the bios. And here is the question, and perhaps we can post the question in the Q&A so that everyone can see it maybe. What hopes, expectations do you bring to public conversations like these? So we're going to start with Kent Alkire from Bahai. What's the answer for you to that question?
Well, the Baha'i faith was actually founded on the principle of the oneness of mankind. And so from the inception, from the beginning in 1844, and every community around the world, the issue of bringing people together, getting over the issues of race or class or tribe, it is paramount to the principles of the oneness of mankind. So it is a fundamental principle. It's a fundamental part of the Baha'i faith, the belief that all people are created from the same God and have all the same qualities, and that we, in order for us to, as individuals and as a group, to progress, we have to recognize that exists in all people the same qualities, and we must recognize that and treat people with the same level of respect and kindness and opportunities. And so the issue of race is a significant element of the teachings of the Baha'i faith.
Kent, thank you so very much.
Mhm.
Wendy, should I read the question again, or you want to just go for it?
Hi, sorry, technical difficulty.
No worries.
Actually, no, that's fine to not read it. What I would say is anytime I participate in a public forum, what I really hope to do is to bridge the gap between what pagan faiths actually do and what most of the public thinks they do, which is mostly from TV and movies. But regarding our topic tonight, I do want to say that there is absolutely no historical basis, value, or justification for racism or white supremacy in modern pagan faiths and practices. There is nothing in, for instance, the practices and rituals of Wicca and neo-pagan faiths that requires a person to be of a specific ethnicity or practice. So if by chance somebody is saying, well, you can do this, but you have to be XYZ, that's a person saying that. In other words, that's not part of the faith. I've never seen any language that refers to, for instance, the ethnicity of a devotee in writings that explain how to approach a god or goddess of a specific pantheon, only instructions on offerings and prayers and so forth, but nothing is ever mentioned saying you need to be of this ethnicity.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Ryan?
Yes. So I start out with Assalamu alaikum, which is a greeting in the standard Muslim greeting for may peace be upon you. So I think the biggest thing is the focus on the similarities we all have, to achieve peace, justice, righteousness, love, and to build a stronger community. This is all really summed up really in the most often quoted verse in the Quran, chapter 49, verse 13. O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female and made you into nations, into tribes, that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of God is the most righteous of you. Indeed, God is all-knowing. So this one verse of the Quran sums up the equality and interaction of humankind. Simply put, God loves diversity. God did not create us and evolve us so that we could live like hermits, solely interacting with our own kind. God actively wants us to interact with each other, exchange ideas, break bread together, learn from each other, and of course, love one another. Furthermore, in the second half of this verse, God explicitly states that our nobility is not based on our race, gender, ethnicity, nation, or what tribe you and I belong to, but rather what we do. To that end, we can surmise that righteousness cannot be solely defined by what religion we claim to belong to. So my main point here is that we cannot treat our religions or communities like a noun. For us to be righteous, our communities must be a verb. We must do good and we must love. The deeds of the Muslim prophets of Abraham, Moses, John, Jesus, and countless others are mentioned in the Quran, as well as the same stories in many of our other brothers and sisters' religious texts. Let's reflect on what they did for their communities. Is it what tribe they came from, or rather what deeds they performed that defines their righteousness? It's not good enough for our communities to simply go to our respective houses of worship on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or whatever day of the week it may be, and do nothing the other 6.5 days out of the week. This isn't love, and this doesn't build a community. So what does? These are all activities I think we can agree on: taking care of the poor, providing shelter to those escaping persecution, respecting our elders, supporting our neighbors, respecting diversity, taking care of our environment. This is what love is, and that's what binds us all together. And yes, we may represent individual communities, but we all belong to the original tribe of Adam and Eve. And yes, we may have our differences, but our small differences cannot and will not get in the way of us achieving a righteous community together. So I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart, and I look forward to learning as much as I can from all of you. to broaden my horizons. And God bless and thank you, and may peace be with us all. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Reverend Stacy Thomas.
Hi. Would you please repeat the question, John?
Not a problem.
Thank you.
What hopes, expectations do you bring to public conversations like these?
Okay, that's a very good question to start us all off with. And when I think about a conversation like this, it's really opening up the dialogue. It's about being open-minded and having the ears to hear, as Jesus often quoted in the gospel lessons. When we talk about something like racism and religion, it's a very tough topic. And I come to something like this knowing that I don't have hardly any of the answers. So I need to practice humility and open-heartedness and open-mindedness. I need to know what other people are saying and what other people's beliefs are. And I just want to say thank you so much to the panelists who went before me with their deep sharing and their connectedness to their faith traditions. With Christianity, especially progressive Christianity, there is a focus on the verse from Deuteronomy, which is from the First Testament, that says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your strength." Jesus taught this in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, adding the word "and your mind." So we are also to love God with all of our mind. He tells the story of the Good Samaritan and says that we also must love our neighbor as ourselves. Who is our neighbor? Our neighbor is anyone who is in need. It's not just your next door neighbor. It is anyone who is in need, anyone who has a care, anyone that requires support and love, anyone who would benefit from receiving hospitality, generosity, any of those things that Ryan mentioned just a few minutes ago. When we love God with everything within us, we cannot help but to love our neighbor. And loving our neighbor goes across all the boundaries and all of the borders that humanity has put in place, whether it's ethnicity, religious traditions, language, geography where we live, a level of education, socioeconomic levels, anything like that. God transcends all of that, and we are called by God to transcend all of those things as well in reaching out and loving others. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for having me be on this panel and being a part of this conversation. And I look forward to hearing from everyone else and learning and growing.
Fantastic. Before we go on to our next one, I just want to make sure that the attendees know that there's a Q&A in the bottom of the screen. You can type in a question. What we're doing is we're going to go through this one question with all the panelists, and then we'll proceed to other questions. And so if you want to put a question in the bottom part, it says Q&A. You can type your question in, and as we have time, we'll go through these panelists first, and then we'll go through the questions that are presented and then the ones that we have here. So now we're going to go with Rabbi Michelle.
Hi, everyone. And this is great. My expectations, in a sense, are twofold. So one is for us as the panelists to learn and grow from each other, and also for everyone listening like Stacy said, and everybody agreed, to have this very important conversation for our community and anyone else who might be listening. And for the panelists, it's an opportunity, and for everyone who's listening, to meet with one another, see and hear from each other, and to listen to each other, to learn about our different faith approaches, spiritual paths, make friends with one another. I think Kent was one of the first, Kent Al-Khair, one of the first people I met several years ago in terms of putting this together or re-putting it together. We had other faith groups, interfaith groups in the past. And the idea was to be there to help one another, our communities, as people in the community, to maybe understand a bit more our differences, work on the things that we have in common, celebrate the differences in a sense. That's what makes it interesting. And the ultimate goal is of enriching each other through friendship, through mutual respect, and helping our community, making the community a nice place to be, a place of respect and working together to make it a wonderful place to be, and a place of humanity. So I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Reverend Andy Maddock.
Yes, sir. John, since you outed me as an actor before, I'll give you the actor's answer to this question. I feel like my job, anytime I'm on the stage doing that kind of work, is singular, regardless of whether or not I'm a lead or whether or not I have a bit part. And that's to help everyone else tell the best story they can. And so my hopes and expectations for a time like this mirror that this is an opportunity for, I think, all of us to do three things very well. One is to know our material. As an actor, you have to know your own lines, and you have to know the flow of the show and the value of your part in it. And so I think all of us here have a tremendous sense of the value of our own faith experiences and a trust in the value of our friends and partners in this conversation. So know your stuff. Next is be present. There's nowhere else to be, and no other time than right now to be present to one another, particularly with the kind of vulnerability of the conversations we're having, that this is an opportunity for us to be fully present to one another and be partners in life's journey. Know your stuff, be present. And the last is to listen, that you might be able to faithfully respond, not anticipating what you're going to say or the right answer or, how to unload on a scene, but to truly listen and engage with one another. And so that's my hope and expectation for this time, to find the means and the ways to be able to kind of faithfully know the core of my being, to come to understand the core of others, to be faithfully present in the journey one to another, and then to listen and engage in a way that's respectful and responsible. Not unlike the other progressive Christians in the room, like Reverend Stacy, I see that in the life and teaching and work of Jesus as well. That's a bit of his modality, and so that's my goal for tonight and our hope for our time together. And I'm grateful to be here. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Reverend Stephen Rambo.
Thank you, John. And thanks to everyone that's here. That's what hopes and expectations are. It's a really interesting question for me. I've been sitting with it, listening to all the wonderful answers, and I agree with everyone that's been speaking. And for a personal level, in the Science of Mind teachings, which is distilled by a man named Ernest Holmes, and he was fond of saying, there's one life, that life is God, that life is my life now, that life is your life now. There's only the one life. So if I were to have a hope or an expectation for tonight, it would be to watch that one life expressed in the very unique and individualized ways it can from each and every one of us, making up this wonderful tapestry that we participate in. So it's an opportunity to, as has been said before, to remain open. And so because of that idea of remaining open, I come here with, I don't want to say no expectations, but an open expectation to learn, to be present, as Andy was saying, to know my lines, and also to experience the audience. When the audience comes to an experience, they bring the desire to hear. So they pull you, the panelists, I mean, the participants will pull the knowledge that is right and perfect for you. And so I want to be that vehicle and that vessel, as all of our panelists do, to bring that information out. So if there's any expectation, it's to be a vessel, to be a divine vessel, to speak the truth as I know it and see it. And hopefully that truth can reflect the oneness that we all participate in this one life that is God's life.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
President Kent Lee.
Am I here?
You are. You're up.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I'm very impressed with the ability that all of you have had in articulating why you're here tonight. I share that exactly. I think it's a time to listen, to learn, to express our ideas to each other that you as well might learn. I think once we learn and understand why people are the way they are and what they believe, I think we appreciate them more. We love them more. We care more for them. And so my great expectation and aspiration is that we will learn about each other, have greater respect for each other and why we believe the way we do. And I hope that's also true with what I say might cause you to have greater appreciation the way us in the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ, are. Anyway, it's a real pleasure to be with us, such an august panel of well-spoken people. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Reverend Nika.
Hi, well, I have the joy of going last, but so much of what many of you said are also my hopes and expectations for this evening. In any case, I hope that we would inspire each other tonight to live the values that most religions teach, which are, of course, to love your neighbor as yourself, like Stacy mentioned, and also to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And I would wish that we would find our commonalities and support each other in learning and stretching our understandings, and to live our spiritual values and hopefully become the best versions of ourselves that we can be, because I think religion in its best form calls us to be our highest self. So let me share with you a little bit about Unitarian Universalism, which is a tremendous mouthful to say and doesn't necessarily explain what it's about. So Unitarianism from the 1600s in Europe came about as the idea of the oneness of God and all there is, so the unity of God. And then Universalism was to describe a loving God who would not condemn anyone, who would not cast out anyone, but love everyone. And also the idea that all faiths are valid ways of coming together towards a universally loving God. So the oneness of God and this universally loving God really unites us all. So we are open to people of all different kinds of beliefs. And it's not as important what you believe, but rather who you are in this world. We have 7 principles in Unitarian Universalism. And the first one, probably our key principle, is the inherent worth and dignity of all human beings. So of course, racial equality is hugely important to us. And in fact, our board issued a racial justice statement, which I want to share with you. Chalice Unitarian Universalist Fellowship's Board of Trustees condemns the recent and continued violence leveled against Black people and all people of color. Our UU values call us to do the work of ending racism in all its forms. We embrace the inherent worth and dignity of every person and respect the interdependent web of all existence. So we're all connected. We're compelled by the Black Lives Matter movement and will show up proactively and compassionately in the ongoing struggle for justice and equity. In our work, we must name hard truths and act with love. So basically, to sum up our faith is really about love in action. And that's why we're called to do the work around anti-racism, to live out love for everyone equally through our actions. I'm so delighted to be here with you all tonight. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so very much. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually start with some of the questions that have been typed in and posted. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask a couple of the individuals on our panelists to answer these questions. So Barbara Heath wrote, what has your faith tradition done locally and or nationally to address systemic racism in the United States? So we're going to start with Ryan. You want to answer that one?
Oh, let's see my video. Oh, sorry about that. Yes, that's an excellent question. So luckily in the Islamic community, we're actually really quite diverse. Many people don't, everyone knows, that the Islamic community is diverse, but what a lot of people don't know is that 80% of our Muslim population throughout the world is actually non-Arab. So most Muslims actually come outside the Middle East, on every continent, and the most populous is probably Southeast Asia. So we recently had a major Muslim holiday called Eid al-Adha. And it was the same story that we have in all of our Abrahamic faiths. It was the sacrifice that the prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, was willing to do for God. So he had the dream, and God told him that to sacrifice his son. And when he went to go sacrifice his son, God replaced his son. Instead of the sacrifice, he actually sacrificed a goat. It's actually the end of the Hajj season 2, which is the footsteps of the prophet Abraham and the pilgrimage to Mecca, where all Muslims go throughout the world. But one of my main points about that is we have to, it's a time for charity, and we save 1/3 of the meat of the sacrifice that we all do. 1/3 of the meat stays with us, 1/3 of the meat goes to our friends and family, and 1/3 of the meat must go to the poor. And we recently had a food drive for our Ethiopian Muslim brothers and sisters that are not as well off in the Los Angeles community, and we were able to donate a lot of meat down there. So I think it's important that we recognize, where people need help, and we address that help. So, and again, luckily, I think it's more on the side of not necessarily just race in Islam, since Islam is already quite diverse, but more on the fact of helping people and helping our communities grow and be able to help those that are most in need.
Thank you, Ryan, so very much. We're going to go, I'm going to ask the question again, and then we're going to go to Reverend Stephen Rambo. What has your faith tradition done locally and or nationally to address systemic racism in the United States? And then after Reverend Stephen Rambo, we're going to ask President Kent Lee to answer the same question.
Thank you, John. All right, and thank you for that question. That was Barbara. Thank you for that question. So at the Center for Spiritual Living, we put out each year a guide of suggested talk titles and topics, and that's prepared a year in advance. It's interesting that we've had inclusion in action in August. It was already set up. Colorblind or colorful was one of the topic discussions. October is cosmic connections, inextricably connected, just like me. So we've been dealing with diversity issues within our movement for quite a while. In the most recent incarnation, since the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that we all were shocked at what happened to George Floyd, we put together a lot of international and national, because we are an international group, teaching circles, white fragility, white supremacy, My Grandmother's Hands, various books and lectures by Tim Weiss, and doing these study groups to widen the knowledge of people so that we're not just responding from the feeling of injustice that we can all feel, but also adding a bit of knowledge and context. so that we can build a group of folks who can go out and by their attractive nature, and by attractive nature, I mean by their knowledgeable way of being, create a vibration that allows for others to feel safe to have conversations so that they can also advance in their own knowledge. We've all had that experience where you walk up to somebody and they go, God, that person just has a great vibe. Well, we're about the business of creating a great vibe about inclusion, about diversity, about safety, of asking those questions, knowing that there are no stupid questions. And so the opportunity to ask the question and to get answers from a knowledgeable group of people is central to what the Centers for Spiritual Living has been about in having these national and international workshops, local level and community wide. So that's part of what we're doing at our own center at the Center for Spiritual Living here in Simi Valley. We also have the same thing. We've got 2 study groups going, one studying a book called My Grandmother's Hands, another studying a book called White Fragility. Even since the most recent election, we've had what we call community circles talking about white privilege and looking at those kind of issues. And I feel more than blessed and also somewhat humbled by the opportunity to lead a congregation that selected me as their member, as their spiritual leader, that is about 95% white American. And so that has been a really special thing to be able to move forward with a group of people who already, to use the vernacular, were woke enough to say, hey, come work with our community and lead our community. So it's a wonderful opportunity to continue work that has been going on since the ideals of this nation were set forth. As was been spoken about this week, it was not a perfect union. We're here to perfect the union. And it's really exciting to be at a time more interesting than anything in the last 50 years, where we get a chance to really perfect the ideals of our union through these educational circles that we're participating in our centers.
Reverend, thank you very much. We're so glad you're here. President Kent Lee, here's the question. What has your faith tradition done locally and internationally to address systemic racism in the United States? And then we're going to have Reverend Nika Eaton Quinn answer this very same question, then we'll move on to another question.
That is a great question. And I think that we in the church are constantly reminded of it. We have conferences quarterly and semi-annually in the church, and we get to hear from the leaders of the church, the prophet, the one we sustain as a prophet in the church, and the 12 apostles. They're constantly re-emphasizing the basic doctrine, which is Heavenly Father is the creator of all his children. We're all equal in his eyes, and he sent a savior to save us. I think it's interesting to note the church has grown rather rapidly, as you're probably aware, and that over 40% of the leadership in the church are from other countries, other cultures, other races. We have diversified greatly as the church has spread so rapidly throughout the world. I've always taken great counsel in the Book of Mormon, where a prophet there named King Benjamin stated that when we are in the service of our fellow men, we are only in the service of our God. And we believe in, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ, that we should follow his precepts and what he taught. And he taught that we should be inclusive of all people. He didn't separate himself. He was with the people. He was among the people. And if we lead in the church, we have to lead all people and get to know them and get to love them, because we truly are brothers and sisters in the truest sense.
Fantastic. Oh, there we go. Thank you. The last one on this question is going to be Reverend Nika. Then we're going to move on to another question from Rebecca, and we're going to have Pastor Maddock talk about that one.
So thank you, Barbara, for your question. We believe really passionately in this work at Chalice, and so are trying to really grow our understanding as a majority white congregation and have these conversations on a regular basis. For the last 2 years, we've been hosting a program called Beloved Conversations, which is a nationally designed curriculum to open, very sensitive conversations among different people and have them learn in a safe space about issues of white fragility and racism and white supremacy culture and all of those topics that can be very charged and difficult to talk about. So we've been working on that, and more members of our congregation have engaged in that curriculum. We also have a racial justice team that meets every month, and they are putting on a lot of different programs, are involved with the local community. They have study groups and book groups. Currently there's a book group on the book Mindful of Race, approaching racism from a mindfulness perspective. We've had speakers come from Surge, showing up for racial justice, and Chris Crass, and weekend workshops and community circles and big community forums around issues around race that are open to the wider public. In fact, I think we have the leader of one of our community forum program here with us tonight, Randall Edwards, who does an amazing job bringing a lot of these topics to our congregation and the community beyond. And this all goes back that Unitarians and Universalists have always been at the forefront of social justice movements, and we're very much involved with abolitionism in the mid-1800s. And so we've constantly tried to work on expanding our understanding and perspective and moving from a faith that is was majority white to a faith that is all embracing and empowering. And so in 2017, we actually had a big national issue come up in our faith where some hiring practices were questioned about whether they were favoring particularly white males. And so that led to a tremendous deepening in our faith of this work to really address systemic racism throughout our whole culture, both within our faith and within our country, and to start becoming really aware of how it impacts everything, our hiring practices and the way we think and the way we create worship. And so we're really trying to completely expand our thinking, embrace diversity, and become more conscious and really empower people of color within our faith. So it's an ongoing project that requires tremendous humility, that requires the willingness to make mistakes and pick up and start again the next day. And so it's a humbling process, and one I'm very grateful to be learning more about every day. And I know many of our congregants feel the same way. So I invite you to join us anytime if you wish to continue this kind of work.
Thank you very much. So, Reverend Andy Maddock, here's the question. This is from Rebecca. Many people of color, including people of very diverse heritages, have been sharing firsthand stories of racist incidents and experiences in the local community. What is the responsibility of people of faith to these stories and injustice and the pain they represent? What message do faith leaders have for the white majority about these experiences of their neighbors?
Rebecca, what a fantastic question, and I thank you for it. Normally, I would shy away from a question like this. As a cis white male pastor, I have a lot of reservations about somehow speaking on behalf of communities, but I think the last part of your question is what kind of motivated my interest and my desire to jump in here. The first part to that, about honoring and hearing the wounds of those within our communities is a powerful testament. To know that that yes, here in Simi, we bear the wounds of incidents of broken fidelity within our own community and deep and consistent struggles with racism. We represent the broader swath of our experience as a country right now, even here in the midst of our community. The response of the people of faith to these stories, I think, needs to be twofold. One is immediate. It's not something I think that we can continue to say, well, it'll get better someday, or gosh, it's so much better than it was. We need to be present to folks in the midst of their fears and in the midst of their anxieties. The second layer to that with our immediacy is to peel back, as you know, books that others had mentioned, things like white privilege and whatnot, our fear of defensiveness in that matter, and what might be the knee-jerk reaction amongst a lot of folks who look like me to say, well, I didn't do it. It's not me. It's not my fault. Surely you don't mean me. And begin to find ways to address not only how we are participating in subtle, innate, and even direct patterns of racism, sexism, genderism within our own communities, but the ways in which an inactivity, a passivity to respond to that is perpetuating an issue. And so that brings me to your last question. What message do faith leaders have for a white majority about these experiences of their neighbors? And this is something that I've really, taken a lot of umbrage with and really pushed my own sense on because I have been given a pulpit, I have been given a voice. And while it comes from a place of the majority, so often in life we look at the struggles of the other and say, where are their leaders? Where are the people stepping up and saying what you're doing is wrong? Where are the people who are stepping up to drag you out of the despair and brokenness, whether it be patterns of poverty or issues of racism and whatnot? And oftentimes what we do not do is speak to the groups that find themselves in the majority and take leaders from within them and lift up that same challenge and to say, where are you addressing the patterns of white privilege and the patterns of racism within your community? I think it rests on the shoulders of all of the folks on these panels and in our local churches, regardless of our theological positions, regardless of our religious histories, to begin to lift up a challenge one to another about the idea, about patterns of hatred and racism, and particularly white supremacy, and to say that not only are they not okay, but this is a season, this is a time where we directly have to step into creating new patterns and new opportunities. We need to be a transformative presence, and we need to do that from a place of accountability. We need to be holding one another accountable and putting one another's feet to the fire, so to speak, about changing the patterns of our lives, the unspoken and passive ones, and even the more direct and concrete ones, and to begin to reinforce, to come alongside and to partner with the BIPOC folks within our community and within the larger community of Southern California in particular and throughout our country, and to find ways to be good partners and to listen well to them. That would be my answer to your question, Rebecca. I think it's very well asked, and I'm grateful for it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Kit Alkire, we're going to ask you to answer the same question. Do you need me to read it, or can you see it from Rebecca?
No, I'm okay with that. A couple things came to mind because we in the Baha'i community collectively have programs and classes and seminars and webinars that deal with race, because it's been a predominant theme from the history of the Baha'i faith. But what I want to focus on for a thought is because when this opportunity came up to speak, I thought I would be the last person who should speak. I'm an old white guy talking about race, and knowing that I wake up in the morning without having to worry about my place in the world in that regard. And so I tried to talk to some of my brother friends and ended up back on me. And one of the comments that a good friend of mine I've known for 50 years, he said that one of the opportunities that you have in terms of in your life and in this forum is to address the fact that we as individuals have a part to play in healing the racial issue, and that the best person to speak to another white person about race is another white person, because often people camouflage their true feelings when they're talking to somebody of a different race. And there has been many directives and books and things written in the Baha'i faith. There's a huge amount of information and writings that the Baha'i faith has produced. And one of the ones that I thought that came out of Advent and Divine Justice from the guardian of the Baha'i faith, Shoghi Effendi, said that whites should abandon once and for all they're usually inherited and at times unconscious sense of superiority and to correct their tendency towards revealing a patronizing attitude. And so I think that one of the things that, one of the principles of the Baha'i faith that I found particularly interesting is that that we have two aspects. One is the independent investigation of truth, which I take as that often we are born, and I was born, with a parent who was a good man but had latent racial tendencies and brought up in a community that had real racial tensions in riots and such. And so my exposure to that had an impact on the way I thought about race. And when I became a Baha'i, one of the things that I was told to do is that I should look beyond those things that I've inherited, the things that I've been taught, and look for the truth of that. And, as a Baha'i, I believe that mankind is one, that the teachings of Christianity and Islam about the fact that we are all come from the same God and that we can treat each other is absolutely true. It exists in all the major faiths of the world. Religion is interconnected. Also is the elimination of prejudice of all that is a mandate directive that we are given as individuals. And that can come in the form of race, it can come in the form of age or other things. And so what I thought of is we talked about this because in fact we do have representatives at the UN and we have people that deal with all these forums on race. But at the bottom line, we are told as Baha'is, we have a personal responsibility to transform ourselves and to reach out to people who are different from us, whether it's race or religion or whatever, and to be a source of warmth and love and friendship and make them realize that we are sincere in that we're not simply trying to manipulate, but we have brought into our own self. And that's a work in progress. I find every day that there are subtle things that I didn't realize that existed. And I think that it's one of I remember being at a forum where there was a Zoroastrian who said that the basis of their faith was good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And I think that's really the basis of all of our faiths, that we have to, think good things, say good things, and do good things, and do it to people that often don't really trust that we're being sincere. And we have to persist and to the point that they realize that as people of faith, and as a Baha'i, that we're sincere in wanting to see a connection between people, and this racist separation that exists is something that's imaginary and created by ourselves. It's not a true thing.
And something that Kent says regularly is that as we're meeting in different groups, that there's more items that we have in common than we have in differences. Kent, I appreciate you always sharing that with us. We're going to go with Rabbi Michelle. Here is a question for you. How do you deal with texts and past histories that are less favorable or inclusive?
And that's a really good question. And I wanted to share that I like this question because it's something we all have to struggle with, and whether it's as a society, as our country, or in our faith groups. And actually, tonight or last night was the new moon. So we follow the lunar calendar, lunar solar, because there's add-ins. And we're starting the month now leading up to our high holidays. So this is the month of spiritual preparation. And we use this Hebrew word, which is teshuvah, which means, you could translate it in different ways. It could be return, it could be repent, it can be making change. And I read something really nice that made me think of this. How do you deal with text or past histories? And actually, Reverend Nika just said, we make mistakes and we pick up again. And I think that's part of our life. That's part of the Jewish tradition, and probably every tradition has. We make mistakes, we learn from them, and we strive to repair ourselves. So it says, teshuvah is turning again to face the other, not to annul what has occurred, but to sew up the wounds and determine how to go on. And I think that ties in with our opening question, that we're having this conversation because the wounds are there, the reality is here. And we also, I think someone put in the chat the questions, what do we want for our society and why can't we do it as a country? Well, we're having this conversation, and this is in Simi Valley. That's a big deal. So we are continuing this process of trying to bring together spiritual healing, communal healing, racial healing. And like Reverend Stephen said, to be able to be an African-American in a primarily white congregation is huge. It means that it's looking beyond the color of his skin to who he is and what he can offer the community. So I just think that that's a beautiful thing. And I think that dealing honestly with the text, looking at them, and also looking through our cultural lens of how we have changed as people and as a society, and how we can bring about healing, bring about repair, and bring about inclusivity, welcoming people so people can feel part of whether it's our congregations or our community at large, that each person is a valuable part of our society and our community.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Reverend Stacy Thomas, we're going to have you answer, if you don't mind. Randall Edwards' question is, many of you have spoken about celebrating our commonalities and finding common ground. What do you feel is keeping us as a nation from doing this? And what would you call upon us all to do to help bring us together towards dismantling systemic racism now?
Okay, thank you. Randall, that is a really good question, questions that you are bringing up. And I would say that actually part of your second question it answers the first question that you asked, which is what do you feel is keeping us as a nation from celebrating our commonalities and finding common ground? You mentioned dismantling systemic racism. That is exactly what we need to do as far as coming together as a nation. Our nation was founded on the principles of racism, and that is something that has been ingrained and entrenched in America for 400 years. And that is something that is going to take time and energy and effort and dedication and commitment to dismantle. And it needs to be dismantled systemically because it affects every single part of life. Racism is part of our educational system. It is part of banking and finance and economy. It is part of transportation. It is part of whether you can go to college. It's part of what kind of job you can get, how much money you can earn. And it's part of where you can live. Are you going to end up living in an apartment in a more rundown place, or are you going to be able to afford living somewhere else? And with all of that comes dealing with people who are different from you. And that's what it really stems from. When we are confronted with the other, there's fear. We feel afraid and we want to run or we want to attack. And the initial cry is, get away, you're different. And it's really, human beings are 99.9% the same. And we have all the same longings, the same desires, the same hopes and dreams and wishes for our communities, for our families, for getting along in the world. And I think that if we start by loving our neighbor, if we start by reaching out and saying hello and being friendly with another person and welcoming them into a conversation and being humble enough to know that I don't have all of the answers. And here I am, I'm a white person on this panel, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that I'm a person of privilege. I know that I have my own work to do to address the white privilege that I have been given for no other fact than the color of my skin is light or white. And I need to go through my own inner workings, my own dealings with white supremacy. And one of the things that my church right now is doing is we've started a book group going through the book, Me and White Supremacy, Combat Racism, Change the World, and Be a Good Ancestor by Layla F. Assad. And this is just a plug for the book group, for those of you who might be interested in it. And she started this out on a 28-day Instagram challenge, getting people to talk about white supremacy, white privilege, and starting to dismantle it from the inside. It starts personally. You have to take a personal journey before you can go out into the community to start dismantling the structures and the systems that are in the community. And I would say that that is where we start, and that we need to be in it all together. And I hope that I've answered your question sufficiently enough, Randall. Thank you very much.
Just one more plug. Your book group is meeting Tuesday nights? Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. And you can contact me for more information, Rev Stacy at uccsimi.org. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thanks, Reverend. We're going to have Ryan answer that question. You want me to read the question again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Many of you have spoken about celebrating our commonalities and finding common ground. What do you feel is keeping us as a nation from doing this? And what would you call upon all of us to do to help bring us together towards dismantling systemic racism now?
Thank you for that question. And I'll start out with a little story. Obviously being white, I never had to experience racism in my life, and never went through that. And a few months ago, before the pandemic, our mosque in Simi Valley was looking to renovate and expand, and it caused us to have to re-permit the land that we were on, and we had to have a community meeting for it. And a lot of people came in support of us. But we actually had some people that came that had really ugly Islamophobic, racist comments. And for the first part of my life, that was the first time I've ever experienced racism. And it was twofold. We experienced Islamophobia, but I also became so ashamed to be white for the first time in my life. It was just something that I couldn't believe. The comments were, you're going to bring terrorists in. You're making our schools unsafe. Just a lot of things, and it was really hurtful to hear those type of comments. But so one of the things that to address that question is it's important that we educate, make peace with our brothers and sisters, and focus on humanity and our similarities instead of squabbling on our petty political differences. So how do we get there, and how did we get here first? I think one of the things is social media is just an absolutely wonderful thing, but unfortunately it's allowed us to wall ourselves off and create echo chambers. So if we want to hate, we're not isolated. We can find a social media group that allows us to hate and bounce ideas off one another and grow even more hateful. So that's a problem. And I think that we need to have more events. Unfortunately, the pandemic has stopped that from happening, but more events in which we have, such as the picnic we had, the Abrahamic Faiths picnic, where the Muslim community gets together with the Jewish and the Christian communities, and we talk to one another. So I think that's the most important, and Rev Stacy talked about this, is that we need to have conversations and not get defensive. We need to have conversations and talk to one another, not get our stuff from the internet, not search for things that look into stereotypes and our racist tropes. But we also, in our faiths, need to do a better job to educate internally and externally why we do the things that we do. For example, in Islam. Why do women wear the hijab? Isn't this a form of misogyny? That's what a lot of people think. Well, you know, we see this coming in, but if you go to any church, look at a stained glass window of Mary. She's wearing a hijab. It's about, for women, it's about modesty. So women are not objectified and gawked at, and they're treated like a human being. And also, for instance, my wife has her own personal bank account. In Islam, whatever my wife makes and whatever my wife makes before marriage, after marriage, it all belongs to her. Whatever I make during our marriage or before our marriage belongs to us. So that's that. So I think that's important for us to get the message out, to basically talk about this thing. The other thing too is we got to do a very darn good job in our religions. I talked about this in the opening. We got to treat it like a verb, not a noun. You cannot have get out of jail free cards in our religions. You cannot say, I believe in Islam, I'm going to heaven no matter what. I believe in Moses, I'm going to go to heaven. I believe in Jesus Christ as my personal savior. That's my get out of jail free card. It doesn't matter. No, we need to stop that. And that's our job as religious leaders, to get that message out. There are no get out of jail free cards. And what you do matters. What you say matters. What you post online matters. And I think that message needs to get out. And I think us as a community, not only do we need to bring together our communities and talk to one another about our commonalities, but we also need to go back to our congregations and be like, no, this isn't right. We cannot put women and children in cages at the border of the United States. We cannot kill innocent Black men and say, oh, it's okay. No, that's not okay. And I think that needs to get out there more and more and more, and also avoid the social media in which we're just talking in echo chambers. And I think that's stopping us from coming together. Thank you for that question.
Ryan, thank you very much. We're going to have a couple questions, see if we can have Wendy answer a couple questions. One that was kind of directed towards you and your faith. Are there a lot of people of color, POC, a lot of people of color in the pagan community? And then just Elaine Litster says, in these difficult COVID times, how have you been able to lead your congregants in worship? That'll be for Wendy.
Okay. Well, great questions. So within what we consider pagan religions, which really is anything that is not it's like a non-Abrahamic religion. So even something like Native American practices would be considered pagan by most people. There's a huge amount of traditions and choices and what we call pantheons, of various gods and goddesses. And just as diverse is the ethnicity of people that participate in these spiritual practices. So yeah, in a word, yes, there are many, many people of color and people of all colors. And to the second question was about worshiping well. We as pagans, we have a tendency to especially like to do our spiritual practices outdoors whenever possible. So, and some people go to parks or have crowds. We often have a lot of, burning of candles and lighting of sage, smoke, and that sort of thing. So it's a little difficult to do a lot of that stuff indoors, but I mean, we do that also. But like most congregations, people, the local groups, and even larger conventions that happen all over this country and all over the world for pagans of various ilks have had to resort to exactly where we are now, to Zoom ritual and Zoom workshops and that kind of thing. Is it as good as when we can be in person? Absolutely not. But it's what we have to do right now. It's what we have. So it's difficult, but you know, we're managing just like everybody else is.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. So we're getting close to the end of our time because we don't want to burden anybody who's participating or watching and listening. So what we're going to do is just do maybe a final short, brief comment from each person. We'll go in the same order as we started, and then we'll just call it a night. So Kent Alkire, you want to go first?
Sure. Okay. All right. Hi, how are you? At the core principles of the Baha'i faith, there is what we call the three onenesses, the belief that there's one God that all faiths are connected to and believe in, and that all religions are like links of a chain, and that they're all interconnected, the Abrahamic faiths as well as the Eastern faiths, that God has inspired man from the beginning of time to learn and need what he needs to know at the time for the time in which he lives. But to focus on the actual topic, which is what was the intersection of faith and race, the idea of faith in this context is something we believe in, something that we get from some source that is other than something that is necessarily logical. And that, you know, as people of faith, all the people on this panel, we have a common belief that, you know, that we are created in the image and likeness of God, and that we should treat people as if as good as or better than ourselves. And so from a faith perspective, I think we're in agreement. And one of the other principles that come into play, in addition to the independent investigation of truth, which is a core principle, and also the elimination of prejudice, which is a personal action each of us take, is that science and religion are metaphorically like the wings of a single bird. And what's important to that, to me, is that there's so much, going back to some of the subjects that, you know, the idea of what can we do or how do we deal with this this great separation that exists between people now. We're living in such a divisive time, is that, you know, if you're not a person of faith and you don't believe that someone who's black is equal to you, then but if you're a person of reason and you can look at science is basically proven through the use of archaeology and through the use of genetics, that we all have a common foundation. We all come from the same place, and the differences that occurred were the differences of how Mother Nature impacted where we chose to live. And so the accuracy of the fact that we place a value on someone different than ourselves is not something that is consistent with faith, or is it consistent with reason? And that we as individuals, first of all, have to transform ourselves, and then that transformation will have an impact on the people that we attract to us. And I think that's within the subject. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being part of the panel.
Kent, we appreciate it. We're going to kind of pivot just slightly. We're going to change the order in reverse order from now on. So Reverend Nika Eden Gwynn, you want to tell us a couple of words in parting?
Yeah, first of all, I just think it's wonderful that we could all get together tonight, and I'm so grateful for everybody who came out this evening to have this discussion. I think it's a really important discussion, and you know, I think these are unusual times we're living in, and we were recently at a workshop led by Chris Crass where a woman talked about this being a liquefied moment. So if you imagine almost like the tar melting in a hard road, we're in that time right now where things are melting and opening a little bit, and we need to take this opportunity to put our footprint in that tar and to start to make change in this often very constricted, hard-hearted world that we can live in. So I guess my way of living out our faith is really to build on the momentum that has come very tragically with the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others. But it's opened people's hearts, and I think we need to go from here now with more open hearts and continue the work, not stop it again and shut it down and get complacent, but keep talking, keep having meetings like this, keep learning, keep expressing and growing and having difficult conversations so that we can all live into a promise of a more beautiful world that we can all dream about. And that is at our fingertips if we all commit to walking towards it. So I just invite us all to take advantage of this moment, to do our individual work and to do our work with our communities and keep expanding our hearts and listening to one another and treating everyone you come across with love and care and the dignity that they deserve.
Reverend Nika, thank you so very much. President Kent Lee.
Well, I've learned a lot. I really enjoyed, Brian, what you had to say, especially about the women and the modesty and the way you protect them. I think it's great. You know, the LDS Church has suffered tremendously persecution. This church is organized in a country that had a constitution that allowed freedom of religion. Yet when the church was organized here, and they started one of the early settlements in Missouri, because they were persecuted. One of the reasons they were persecuted is because they were against slavery. And you know, Missouri and the Missouri Compromise was granted slavery, and Maine was given a free state. My father had descendants that were from the pioneer stock who suffered that persecution. Yet he moved to a small city, a little tiny city, about 200 people, a little city called Hoytsville, Utah. He never saw Black people, but he was scared of them. And to be honest with you, my father was a racist. He wouldn't say he was, but when he came walking down the street, if he saw a Black man coming toward him, he'd cross the street. My younger sister, you heard me say that we had 10 children in my family. My younger sister got married, and her husband wanted children desperately. They couldn't have any. They paid a lot of money to try. Finally, they started adopting children. They ended up with 9 children. Whites, they had Koreans, they had Blacks, 3 Blacks. They had one who was part Filipino and part Vietnamese. They got from Vietnam because nobody would have him because he had white blood in him. And so they ended up adopting him. They had 9 children, all these different races. My father fell in love with those children. It changed him. I know we have to have conversations and talk about them, but what we need is to open up our hearts and love them. We can love other people, really love them. Then I think we can conquer this racism as it happened to my father. He learned to love people, his own grandchildren, through adoption, and it changed his life. I think that's what this panel does, is we're learning to love each other, to know about each other. And because of that, it changes our lives. Thank you. I enjoyed being on this panel. Thank you.
President Kent, thank you very much. Reverend Stephen Rambo.
Oh, thank you, John. Oh, President Lee, Stake President Lee, thank you so much. You're right. Love, so powerful. And all the shares tonight have been wonderful. I want to speak to the 31 participants in this panel, panelists and attendees, and say, get curious and be willing to become uncomfortable. Let's all be willing to stretch ourselves into new territory and trust our faith. We have within us the self-givingness of the divine. We're here because we believe in a higher power, in an internal being, an indwelling presence that will guide us and support us and lead us in these conversations. Stretch outside your community. Be genuinely curious. It's a reason that the great Wayshower said, become like children. Not childish, but childlike in wonder. You know, we call it practicing faith. The reason we practice is because we're gonna make mistakes. That's why they took that term from archery called sin. You don't stop shooting arrows. You just reach in the quiver, you pull another, you fire another arrow. If you make a mistake, you say something, hurt somebody's feeling, apologize, and start again. That's how we expand this conversation beyond the 31 that are here. You know, if we each, I'm not good at math, but if we each talk to 100 people and they talk to 100 people and they talk to 100 people, wow. Wow. So let's just get busy. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Thanks for letting me be a part of this conversation tonight.
Reverend Rambo, thank you very, very much. Reverend Andy Maddock.
As we wrap up, you know, I'm struck by a question that went unanswered in our chat, and that was Council Member Luevano's question: how can the education system and educators play a part in dismantling systematic racism and religious discrimination? And I think, you know, that my part in this work, you know, kind of lines up with, I think, the spirit behind that question, insofar as there have been major periods in the history of religion where religious folks saw themselves as so countercultural, as an alternative to secular ideas, as an alternative to you know, patterns of state worship, that they found themselves literally cloistered and apart from one another. That those periods in history somehow reinforced a mentality that we are somehow in this alone. And I think that we are at a point where educators alike, be they from pulpits or in classrooms, need to begin to address the broken patterns that start with our common history, but also you know, reinforce patterns of the importance of science, of intellectual exploration, of ideologies like philosophy, psychology, and to begin to encourage a passion for exploring and understanding the human condition. I think, to Ryan's earlier point about the kind of misdeeds we do among social media and to one another therein, that's a pattern we need to break. We can't be so countercultural as to divorce ourselves from a full experience of one another. This is a time and a season where, as we begin to address these patterns of racism, of intolerance, of injustice, that we each need to be bold in our witness and our presence one to another in helping to address those matters. I thank you so much for your time tonight and for the opportunity to be present with each of you. Thanks and God bless.
Thank you, Reverend. Reverend Michelle.
Yeah, thank you, John. And thank you to everyone for all the amazing comments and insights. And I'd like to say that I think the idea of, I like the idea of being uncomfortable, but comfortable enough to have the conversation. And I've been reading this book. It's called Leading with Dignity. And it has some interesting ideas. And one of the ideas, one of the comments in here is, trust is the lubrication that makes it possible for organizations to work. And even us joining together tonight of different faiths, different ideas, we trust one another that we're gonna respect one another, that we wanna learn from each other, that we're not afraid. I'm not threatened, you're not threatened. No one's out to offend anyone. We're here to share and learn from each other. And I think that creating that, and someone put in the questions, you know, what can we do in our greater society? Well, this is part of it, having this conversation and doing this, and having that sense that places are safe. So when people know when they come to the synagogue, it's a safe place to have different viewpoints, and we're going to hopefully respect one another and have a positive conversation that has, you know, a multiplicity of input and ideas and diversity of opinions, and we can still have a dialogue and but still come out respecting one another and treating each other with dignity, even if we agree to disagree, but we have it in a positive, constructive way. And maybe that's the way to go about breaking down some of these things that have been part of our society, and having people share what they feel, what they've experienced, and how we can create a sense of trust for people, that they know that they're going to be heard and respected in our society. And I think that that's a really, really important thing to work on, and something beautiful that we can do together. And I'm really honored to be part of this group, to have this opportunity. And I want to thank the people that are listening, people sharing, And I hope that it's uplifting, and the questions were really helpful as well. So I really want to thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Reverend Stacy Thomas.
Hi, thanks, John. I just want to say, I mean, I don't even know what to say after all of this amazing conversation, except that thank you so much for having me on this panel. Thank you to all the other panelists for your insight and your knowledge and your wisdom that you shared with us, for your stories. And to all of our panel, all of the participants, all the attendees, thank you so much for being here with us and for your questions. We've only just begun. This is just the entrance into something bigger and something grander. Keep asking questions. Keep up the conversation. Start a dialogue with somebody. Visit a different church or different faith group. Go to the synagogue. Go to the mosque. Talk to Wendy about checking out a pagan group. Visit the Bahai Center and meet with people. The Unitarian Universalists are also warm and welcoming. I have friends who are UUs that I went to seminary with, and we formed long-lasting friendships. I went to a Methodist seminary and have also warm and long-lasting friendships with them. And it's something that I carry with me all the time. And I'm really grateful to have been to be part of the interfaith conversation, the Interfaith Council. And I just want to say again that it's been a privilege and an honor to be here tonight. And I hope that we continue this very important, very powerful. Sorry, I got excited and my earbuds fell out. I apologize. Very important conversation. This is how we do the work. This is where we begin. Let's go out and do justice and be kind and loving to one another. Let us be gracious and extend that to one another. Thank you so much.
Reverend Stacy, thank you so very much. Ryan?
Sure. I'd probably like to end with kind of an experience that Malcolm X went through. And if everyone remembers Malcolm X, he went through a lot in his life and had a lot of hatred in his heart. And it was actually part of, an organization that was actually racist. But to see what his experiences were in life and what he experienced almost 60 years ago can show us, I think, where we can go to with our faiths. And I quote, "Never have I witnessed such sincere hospitality and overwhelming spirit of true brotherhood as it is practiced by people of all colors, races here in this ancient Holy Land, the home of Abraham, Muhammad, and all the prophets of the Holy Scriptures." By the way, he's talking about his pilgrimage to Mecca here. "For the past week, I've been utterly speechless and spellbound by the graciousness I've seen all around me by people of all colors. There were tens of thousands of pilgrims from all over the world. They were of all colors, from the blue-eyed blondes to the black-skinned Africans. But we were all here participating in the same ritual, displaying a spirit of unity and brotherhood that my experiences in America had led me to believe never could exist between the white and the non-white. During the past 11 days here in the Muslim world, I've eaten from the same plate, drunk from the same glass, and slept on the same rug while praying to the same God with fellow Muslims whose eyes were the bluest of blue, whose hair was the blondest of blonde, and whose skin was the whitest of white. And in the words and the deeds of the white Muslims, I felt the same sincerity that I felt among the black African Muslims of Nigeria, Sudan, and Ghana." So I think that's a very powerful experience that Malcolm X had. And I think that's something that we can all experience in our races or in our religions across all the different races. We all pray to the same God. It's just not Muslims. We all believe in the same God. And so if we can experience that, if Malcolm X can experience that, and he did this in the 1960s, I think there's some hope in our country that we can turn a corner and we can all experience that. And I hope that we can all do that together. And I want to thank everyone for their experiences, their questions, their comments. And I look forward to learning more from all of you in the future and helping drive this conversation forward. Thank you.
Ryan, thank you so very much for joining us. Wendy.
Well, I just want to thank all of the panelists for being here and participating in such a great conversation. And I'd like to extend invitation to anybody that is watching. If you'd like to get involved with the Simi Valley Interfaith Council, please contact us. We have a Facebook page that you can check out, which is the Simi Valley Interfaith Council Facebook. You just look for the little puzzle motif to make sure that you're in the right one. And you can also contact us at Simi Valley Interfaith Council at gmail.com. And we plan to do more events like this. This was a fantastic and very timely event with just excellent questions and excellent speakers, and I'm just really happy to be a part of it. So thanks for everyone.
Wendy, thank you so very much. So now we're going to have hopefully, let's see here. Hopefully on the screen, we're going to hopefully see the email Simi Valley Interfaith Council at gmail.com. That's how if you want to kind of reach out to any of us. Let's go with some of the comments here. Trust our faith. Be present, listen. Community is a verb. Go to a different church. And here's one that I like is talk to 100 people about what you witnessed and felt and saw tonight. This is a great beginning. Again, our next Interfaith Council meeting that we do in Simi Valley is Wednesday, September 9th at 11 o'clock in the morning. If you have that email address, you can find out the Zoom email on that, or go on the Facebook page and we'll get that information to you. What a great evening this has been. The participants and the panelists, those who've joined us, thank you very much. Panelists, thank you very much. And everyone have a wonderful evening, and we'll hopefully see you in the next time, and each of you bring 100 people with you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Wendy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John. You did a great job.
Good job.
Thanks. Thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good comments, everybody. Great comments.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Night.
Night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you again.